Hi everyone, it's Raina. So this video is looking at the natal chart of Elvis, and somebody had requested it, and I had mentioned in another video that Elvis had Sagittarius rising, and that I noticed that some iconic rock stars all have or had Sagittarius rising, and I named Elvis, Bob Dylan, and Elton John. Those are three major stars, and who knows, maybe there are others, because I haven't done all that many charts of rock stars, but I thought that this would be a good time to look at Elvis's chart. Elvis could still be alive today, actually, because he was born in 1935. When he died, he was in his 40s, but he wasn't that old. The 40s isn't like, it's not that young to be considered too much of a premature death, but it's still younger than average, obviously. So Elvis is one of those figures that we associate with the birth of rock and roll, and that's one of the reasons that he is still, he's so popular that we just say one name. We don't even have to say Elvis Presley. And it's interesting because he's born on the same, I guess, do I say date, as David Bowie on January 8th, but of course in different years. So I think I might do David Bowie next because they are quite different personalities for sure. And I was recently watching a bunch of David Bowie videos from early on, and it just like freaked me out, like how ahead of his time he was. But it's so interesting how both of them are Capricorns, because you just don't think of Capricorns as being rebellious, which Elvis was certainly considered at the time that he was swiveling his hips, or somebody like David Bowie, who was kind of a chameleon, and he had that gender bending quality about himself that was very chic in the early 70s. And so anyway, let's talk about Elvis. And it's very interesting because I read a biography about Elvis probably a couple of decades ago, and one of the revelations in it was that Elvis had actually taken psychedelic drugs, which that sounds like an acid trip in itself. The idea of Elvis even thinking of doing something like that. And he had the book Autobiography of a Yogi by Paramahansa Yogananda, which is a classic in Indian spirituality that some of you may be familiar with. But Elvis, like, why? Well, it turns out that Elvis has had the moon in Pisces. So, and Sagittarius rising. Now, that's not a slouch for spiritual influence as well. And so he was very likely a seeker, and I'm assuming he did these psychedelics I think he did do them in like 66, 60, when other people were doing them. But yeah, even even somebody like Elvis did psychedelics. I'm not saying he did them extensively. I don't know the extent that he did them. I doubt that he was constantly dropping acid. I think it might have even been shrooms. I have no idea. But yeah, apparently he did it at least once. And he did read this book that is associated with yogic philosophy, the autobiography of a yogi. And so let's talk about what is going on in Elvis's chart. Now, first of all, Elvis was born in Tupelo, Mississippi. I thought for some reason he was born in Tennessee or Kentucky or something like that. But yeah, I guess he was born in Mississippi. And I really forgot a lot of the details of his life. His father, I believe his father might have passed away when he was young. I don't remember all the details, but I know his mother's name was Gladys and she raised him. But see, she had a substance abuse problem. I think she used to hide bottles of alcohol in different places in the house. So she was probably a very, like a hardcore alcoholic. I don't know if she was popping pills. And of course, as we know, when we think of Elvis, one of the things that comes up is the fact that he had addictive tendencies and that he had a bad prescription pill addiction. And I don't know about if he continued to use alcohol, though. I don't know how that went. But I believe he got involved with the pills when he went into when he joined the service in the late 50s or whenever that was. Maybe it was 1960. He had to enlist for a couple of years. I think that was kind of strange that they made him go when he was already a big star. So I think that he got hooked on those drugs. They said he got hooked on those drugs when he was a GI, and because I think they would give them amphetamines to keep them alert or whatever. So kind of strange that and even the fact that usually if somebody is very successful in terms of their career, they don't force them to do this. I can't remember because there wasn't a war going on at that time. The Korean War was over with, so, and it was before Vietnam. So I don't know if they still had some kind of a draft situation where they had to serve a couple of years. But that really put that really caused a delay in his career advancement because he was so hot, and then he had to go away. And then when he came back, I think that's when he made those beach movies until he had his comeback. So I don't know if I'm correct about that. If somebody is a big Elvis expert, can leave information in the link below. I mean, in the below about that, and fill everybody in. So Elvis had the sun in Capricorn, the moon in Pisces. He had Mercury in Capricorn, Venus in Capricorn, Mars in Libra, and Sagittarius rising. And his sun formed a square with Mars. When somebody has a square with Mars, what can happen is that it's like they feel as if they have to prove something to the world. And this oftentimes will happen if the person is coming from an economically disadvantaged environment where they feel like they are being kept from success. Mars can be your drive, your ambition, and the sun is your what would you call it? Like your attainment of that success. And it's also the goals that you possess. And so when you have a square, it's creating some kind of a blockage. So it means that the person feels an obstacle. They feel like they can't do something the way that they want to do it. And that can create a lot of frustration. It can make the person feel like life is against them in some cases. If they come from poverty, if they come from economically disadvantaged environment, and some cases there can also be other, issues like racial injustice or other things that are that feel like they're keeping them back, then what happens is the person is going to really be ambitious, but it kind of veers into the category of being pushy, being, obnoxious with it. And there's an insecurity that's fueling it, really. And that's just that influence alone. So, there are other things that can make the person more humble. And one of the things that people always said about Elvis was that he was very humble, that he never forgot where he came from. And I really believe that because I read, I think it was in that book that I had, that he would, he was really generous. He would give people cars, just like fans. He would give them cars and stuff like that. And I'm sure the people that he was doing this for were people that were that he knew didn't have much money. And he had an entourage, and I think they were people from, his youth, that he always like hung out with. I think they call it the Memphis Mafia or something. I forgot what they called it, but yeah, I think they were like his buddies from growing up. I'm saying I think because I don't remember if that's the case. But he did have, and they might have even been some of his relatives that he was helping to support. And this is what somebody does. And part of that is also with the family. It's because Capricorn is a very family-oriented sign. So a person like that is going to be very loyal and actually care about these people that he has grown up with, and that, he is, if he has the money, he's going to help them. So one thing I want to mention too, before I get into the moon in Pisces, is that Sagittarius rising, first and foremost, his ruler was Jupiter. And that can be very lucky. That can be the person who is at the right place at the right time. And the other thing, too, is that it can indicate a positive nature. His sun also formed a sextile to Jupiter, and Mercury did as well. So a sextile is an easy aspect, and that means that the energy is flowing very cooperatively between these two planets. So for instance, with the sun and Jupiter, a sextile means, and the sextile versus a trine is a little bit more work, meaning that the person, I don't think you can ever just sit back and just expect something to drop in your lap, but sometimes you have to put more effort into it, but there's a harmonious effect. And I think that, so that just can be good for attaining one's goals with the sun. And then with Mercury, I wouldn't even be surprised if that could be good for singing with Jupiter. That the person has a great speaking voice, singing voice. I was looking for proof, or my belief that Mercury, because it is about communication, that it could also be looked at for one's voice and the quality of one's voice. And I really couldn't find any information on that, if there's any connection between Mercury and singing. But to me, as far as I'm concerned, it's definitely the case, because it's communication. It's just musical communication. And he had a he actually had a conjunction between Mercury and Venus is all of the arts, and also Venus can be very pleasant, harmonious. So somebody who has this combination definitely has a pleasant speaking voice. Even his speaking voice, very, very resonant. Well, he goes, "Hey, everybody." I forgot what his line was. But anyway, one of the things about Capricorn is that it is very serious and very ambitious. And because it's ruled by Saturn, there can be this dour demeanor sometimes. And the sun is, we think sometimes of the demeanor as the rising sign, but the sun can figure into it because the sun is the core personality. And so whatever the sun represents, that can be how the person, basically appears. But if you look at tapes of Elvis, and you can find so many things on YouTube, you will see him always cracking jokes, almost to the point of being kind of like this, class clown type of a guy, where he's always making these jokes. And that is along the lines of the Sagittarius type of energy that's kind of irreverent, never taking things too seriously. And this is how astrology can sometimes get confused, because people think, oh, he's not acting like a Capricorn. Well, he was, because first of all, he was very successful. He was very ambitious. But the main thing about Capricorn that should be stressed is that it's about raising one's station in life. So the mountain goat is ascending, climbing up that mountain. And if we use that as symbolic of station in life, a person who is born into poverty or born into humble circumstances, if they are a Capricorn sun sign, and even it doesn't even have to be Capricorn sun sign, it could be another prominent position, even the rising sign can do this, that they have a natural desire to rise in station in life. Now, sometimes people will do this through marrying into money, marrying somebody who already is established in a higher class, if you will, and then they can get it that way or something else. But there's that desire, because Capricorn rules the 10th house of career, but it's also your status in society. So that is something that's on the mind of Capricorn. Now, Capricorn isn't really about conspicuous consumption, although Elvis was. And I think the reason that Elvis was because he had Mars in Libra as well as Sag rising. And they might have even been, they were trining one another. Or no, that's, a sextile. I'm sorry. They formed a sextile. And the reason that I say that is because both of those signs are free spending, and Libra loves to have nice things. Capricorn loves to have nice things too, but Capricorn is more understated and they're more frugal. Capricorns are not afraid to drop money, some serious money, for quality goods, but they're not going to do that all the time, even if they have they have money to burn, because they are conservative, meaning that they believe in, Saturn is about paring down. It's not about excess. So a Capricorn person typically does not want a whole bunch of things. They want to have just quality things, but they're very Spartan. They love that kind of minimalist type of environment. But Elvis had Graceland, so where did that come from? He doesn't have any planets in the 4th house, but that ostentatiousness is something I would associate with his ruler Jupiter, because it's larger than life, and it was gaudy, tacky. That's the kind of thing that Sag would specialize in. And I'm laughing because I have the sun in Sagittarius. I hope I'm not too tacky, but he had it as his ascendant. So because he was ruled by Jupiter, it also explains why he had a bit of a weight problem. And he didn't always have a weight problem, but he sometimes did because Jupiter can be expansive. Elton John, that one of the other ones that I mentioned with this rising sign, also um, over the years has gone back and forth. And sometimes he's thinner and sometimes he's kind of pudgy. That's that Sag, that Jupiter influence. And also, the other thing about Jupiter, not just that it is expansive, but also it can be very self indulgent. And so it doesn't necessarily believe in being disciplined about things, but more like, hey, why not enjoy it while you can? That could be something. Okay, so looking at some of his house place. Well, first before I do that, I want to just mention that his moon was in Pisces, and the moon can represent the mother. And I had just talked about his mother's substance abuse problems. People who have the moon in Pisces may sometimes have mothers who are lost in some way. And usually the lost quality will be that they're living in their own world. They're living in a dream world, a fantasy world. And either they have mental illness, addiction, and I think addiction is a form of mental illness a lot of times, unless it's more of a soft addiction, but something that is a very serious substance abuse problem. Or they are very fragile, ethereal. There's something about them that's otherworldly or not quite here. But in some cases, it can be simply that they are devoutly religious. And this sometimes is passed down to the child because they might even see their mother as a martyr, someone as a victim. And sometimes, yes, that could be it too, that this woman may be the victim of men, the father, the boyfriend, the stepfather, whoever, their own father. And so the son can sometimes be very protective of that mother, but at the same time, he may be influenced by her in some way. And sometimes I think that there is a lot of irrational guilt that Pisces carries around. People who have parents with serious problems, I think it's pretty common for them to feel a sense of guilt about that because it's almost like they feel like they're causing it. And sometimes these parents will say, if you didn't, act up, I wouldn't be drinking. Because they have to blame someone. So sometimes they actually say horrible things like that. But even if they didn't, it's something that the child can internalize and make it about themselves. And so what the moon in Pisces really is about is understanding suffering at a deep level. And this means the suffering of humanity. And there's always that sacrificial quality when the moon is in Pisces. And I think that, in addition to Elvis being an earth sign, so that down to earth quality that people saw as his kind of aw shucks country boy persona was also with that moon in Pisces. There's an innocence with Pisces or naivete that that shines through, that is very appealing to other people because it's guileless. It's not something where the person is calculated. And this is the position of an empath. So when somebody comes from that humble environment and then they make it big like a superstar, that just enhances that understanding that they are in a place that they've never been before. And yet they know that there are people back at home who are living the same old life that they've always lived. And so the compassion that this sort of person feels for those individuals can be maybe even guilt that, what do they call it? Like, well, sometimes they have survivor guilt, and he was a survivor because he had a twin that died. I don't know if it was uh, after delivery or if the twin died in the womb, but also, this sense of being the one who made it when others didn't. I don't know if they have a name for that. There's survivor's guilt when you survive and somebody dies, but then there's that other kind where you feel guilt because you are successful and you don't want other people to be left behind. And it just, that's not how life works. Everybody doesn't have the same experiences. And so um, that could have also factored into his self-destructive tendencies because he might have felt he wasn't deserving of it in a certain sense. Not that he wasn't talented, but that, you know, he's from Tupelo, Mississippi, and, who is he to have all this money and to have all these things? So this is another reason why I think he felt compelled to be so generous, because Capricorns typically are not generous people. They're really not. And it's not, anything, a slam against Capricorns. It's just, they're just not generous with themselves. They're very frugal, as I stated. And let's see what else I wanted to say about this. He had trines from the Sun to Neptune and Mercury to Neptune, which enhances that Pisces influence, making him very compassionate and very intuitive. And I didn't remember them talking about his actual spiritual experiences. It was more about his reading material. I can't even remember like if he prayed or things like that, but I'm sure he did. I don't know the extent of that kind of thing. But looking in his chart, he had Neptune in the ninth house, which is very interesting. I have videos, a separate video on probably all of these placements. So if you're interested in exploring some of these planets in the houses that you might have in your own chart, then you can check my channel, because over the years I have compiled a collection of different videos on these planets in houses. Neptune in the ninth can sometimes be somebody who communicates with our archangels, but actually can see visions of these beings. If somebody's Catholic, they might communicate with Mother Mary and have visions of her or some other saints. In the Eastern religions, like having visions of Krishna and Lakshmi and those kinds of things, but it's almost like bringing it to life. And I participated in a shamanic journey where the person who was doing the actual event was somebody who said that she had deities visit her. And it just is like totally, it feels so hard to believe. But you never know. He may have had beatific visions that would be associated with Neptune the ninth. And what I think about the ninth house is that these can be specifically from organized religion. So that's why I say if it's some kind of saint or ascended master, if you will, that is associated with an organized religion or system, that might be something. The point is that the person might really feel like religion comes alive, like it's tangible for them, and it's very mystical. And then looking at I was kind of jumping ahead because looking at the second house of earned income, he had a stellium. He had at least 3 planets here, plus the North Node. His sun was here, so he had personal planets: Sun, Mercury, Venus, and then the North Node was in Aquarius. And he also had Jupiter in the 11th house, which is Aquarius's domain. What I think about that with Jupiter in the 11th, his ruler, is that the 11th house can be technology. Elvis debuted in the early days of television. Television was post World War II. So it was the late 40s, but it wasn't something that everybody had initially because television sets were expensive. And back in the day, in America, we made our own television sets. We manufactured them. So it probably was the equivalent. It was a lot more expensive because it was domestically produced. So people would have to have, made a pretty big investment to have a television set. And of course, like any other technology, as time goes on, the price drops because it becomes mass produced and everybody has one. It's not as big a deal. So, this was television's infancy in 1955 or 56, whenever he went on his first television show. And so that's why Jupiter was lucky for him. That's his lucky break because, and the 11th house is not only technology, but the masses. It's the collective. So when you have Jupiter here, it's like you are, your luck comes from, you're able to reach large numbers of people. And people who do so are usually, we would call them superstars because they're not just like a cult following or anything like that. They just are names, household names. So having the North Node in Aquarius in the second house means that not only, North Node in the second house means that you come into this incarnation meant to deal with money. So if you come from humble beginnings where money is tight, it means that you will very likely, at some point in your life's journey, when the time is right, when you're destined to do so, you will acquire large sums of money to be able to manage. I still have been kind of working with that inside my mind, thinking about what that North Node in the second house really is all about. Or if it's in Taurus, that's the other, that's the equivalent to that. Like, what is it really saying? What is it really asking of the person? What is this person's soul? What is this soul's mission? And I think sometimes it can be to spread the wealth. I really believe that, because if somebody acquires a lot of money and they're very greedy and they keep it all, they're not circulating it, they're just keeping it to themselves, they're hoarding it. that might be going you could almost look at it almost as a test of material energy. Like, what are you going to do with this material energy? Are you going to just keep it to yourself, or are you going to share it with others and be humble about it? Like, not allow it to dominate your life and make you more and more lost, if you will. And I think that in his particular case, he was able to, there's like this, he was able to share the wealth with his generosity, because Aquarius is the collective, it is the sign of um, egalitarianism, meaning that it is that kind of democratic spirit, not talking about, political affiliation, but this sense that we are all connected and that we are all worthy of happiness, or, I wouldn't say that we're all equal, that we all have the same talents and all of that kind of thing. But you know what I mean, that everybody should have a voice and everybody has a place. And the sun in the second house can mean that the person identifies with their money. And so this can actually, and also having Venus here, can make a person materialistic, meaning that they enjoy, they gain pleasure, because Venus is about pleasure, from money to such a degree that, they love luxury. Okay. And the sun, because the person's ego is tied up into the amount of money that they make, and I don't mean it like a toxic ego, I mean just their sense of self or identity, that can make them, to me, that can make them attract money, because they are so connected to it. People who are indifferent to money, who may even be repelled by money, resentful that we have to use money to navigate this world, those people tend not to attract money, because they're they don't want to think about money. They don't have a good opinion of money. And the people who feel that it enhances their sense of self, that's going to make them motivated to attain more and more money. The second house is also about possessions, and Venus here can be luxury items. And I think Elvis had like big cars, of course, like I said, Graceland, and his velvet paintings. Didn't he? Or is that, maybe they have velvet paintings of Elvis, and that's how it goes. But I think he had some real interesting decor at Graceland. I'd love to visit Graceland, actually. And Mercury here can actually give somebody who has a mind for money. So that person might be very good at managing money. And I don't know if Elvis was or not. He might have had, I'm sure he had plenty of accountants and stuff like that, but he seemed to make a lot of money. So it's not surprising that he had this concentration of planets here. And he also has, or had, a conjunction? No, a trine between Jupiter and Pluto, and both of those could be associated with wealth. In his third house, which is the house of communication, siblings, the mind itself, he had Saturn and he had the moon. And moon and Saturn form a conjunction. So I think he tended towards melancholy or depression. Saturn is the ruler of Capricorn, of course. The moon is the emotional nature. It's already in Pisces, which is Another thing that we have to talk about Pisces, it's a water sign, and it also is ruled by Neptune, and it can have escapism as one of the key words, which is why it's associated with addiction. Neptune is associated with addiction. And I think that with his Neptune in the ninth house, he was looking for oblivion. He wanted to connect with God. Who knows? Maybe this is even before. This is a memory of, maybe this is a memory of when he was in that spiritual sky and he was connected to source energy in a very conscious way and the bliss that's associated with it. When you think of people who are junkies on the street, they may have the same kind of longings to be at one with the universe, to be, they might have those primal, or whatever you want to call them, memories of not feeling separation, from God. And so there's all kinds of reasons why people feel compelled to abuse drugs and alcohol. And I always look for that too, if I know that the person had that kind of problem in their life, is why, what can you see in the chart? And one of the main things I see is, having a moon in Pisces. And the moon in Pisces can be very vulnerable, very, have a tendency towards that sadness, depression, guilt, and even victimhood. And so escaping from pain might have been just what it was, or just life being too much, being too sensitive to the harshness of life. So the fact that he had this conjunction between the moon and Saturn in the third house of the mind certainly could mean that he was maybe trapped in the past. This could be like having Mercury in Cancer, and memories of childhood, memories of his mother kind of haunting him. The brother that he never had, Aaron, I think, is that what his brother's name was? Because his middle name, I think, was Aaron. But I thought that was the name of his twin brother who died. It's possible. In the fifth house, he has Uranus. This is, again, Uranus, he's got that strong, I see this theme of Aquarius, Uranian influence here. This is the house of creativity, but that creativity with technology. And, it's so funny because we think of technology nowadays as the computer, but back in the 50s, the big technology of that era was the television set. I mean, before the 1950s, or you could say from World War II, which ended in the mid-40s, and before, the radio and movies were the technology of the day. But then you had television, and television was such a huge thing because it, combined audio and visual, and it was in one's own house. So no longer did you have to go outside of your house to see something on a screen. You could have it in your own privacy of your own house. So that connection to creativity, definitely with in that house, it can mean that the person has a kind of a creative self-expression that is very unusual or unique, and they're attracted to people that are like that, especially like romantically, because this is the house of love. And he had an unusual relationship with Priscilla, his wife. At that time, he was, I don't know how many times, I thought he was married a few times. But maybe some of those were just girlfriends. But Priscilla, or did he even divorce Priscilla? I can't remember. But she was very young when he got with her. And I think she was 13 when she even met him. So there was, that was very different. And I don't know, I think I should look that up if Priscilla was an Aquarius, because if you have planets in the fifth house, it can also describe the person that you fall in love with, what sign they are. Actually, she was born on May 24th, and that's the birthday of Bob Dylan, but she was born in 1945. So she was 10 years younger than him. And that's not such a big age difference, but it's just when she met him that that was what was so controversial, I guess. So yeah, so that's that. And then in the sixth house, he had Chiron, which is interesting because this is service to others. This can be the person's pain or wounding, and this is an area of service to others. Well, I can't really see why that would come up for him. Maybe his addiction, it was a health matter that prevented him from doing his work, really. He was incapacitated sometimes, and he couldn't do it to his fullest self-expression. He died prematurely, and he would have been able to do more music that way. But his work ended up healing himself and others too. So it's one of those things, the music business can be difficult, but it can also be something that provides a lot of healing to others. Because I read comments all the time on YouTube, with songs, and people have all these stories about how songs have impacted their lives. It's amazing. In the eighth house, he had Pluto, which is pretty intense. And I don't think that his mother was abusive towards him. I think she just had a substance abuse problem. So I can't remember if he suffered anything that was documented of any kind of abuse. But sometimes abuse happens. I have done this with other celebrities where I had read their biographies, and yet there seemed to be something that might have even been hidden. And we have to remember that in some cases, people never divulge that they have been abused. Sexual abuse is a perfect example of that, where people can be very secretive about things like that. But even other kinds of things, because, or for instance, like what this could be? This honestly could be. I think he might have also been close to death at birth, because Pluto in the eighth house can be, I think, like a near-death experience. And when he was born, and that's why his twin died, I think it was because of this crisis during the birthing process, but I don't know. So that might be what that means. And then the person, if you are born under those kinds of dire circumstances, even if you don't remember a thing, it doesn't mean that you're not remembering it at a deeper level. Eighth house can be subconscious memories. So they're always running in the background. In the ninth house, I've already talked about that. In the 10th house, he had Mars, which is very ambitious. This is the person who is clawing their way to the top, but I don't know if he had to claw all that much. I don't know if he had like a very long time where he had to perform before he became famous. I think he was pretty lucky in that sense, but I could be mistaken. And in the second house of earned income, it's also the house of self-esteem. So if you have your Sun and Venus here, there's a good chance that the person has a healthy self-esteem. Now, again, we're talking about uh, somebody who had addiction issues. How could they have a healthy self-esteem? Because I believe that, or what we could say is confidence, because I believe that sometimes people are, they could have self love, but they also are very sensitive. Maybe they feel other people's pain, and that causes them to confuse it with their own, and they feel this need to kind of escape or something like that. But I feel like, because that friendly angle from the where was it from? It was like from the 10th house. Yeah, that's sextile. Or no, I'm sorry, this actually was a hard angle. The square was coming from the sun in the second to Mars in the 10th. And really, again, that scrappy quality of like, coming from humble beginnings. It's like rags to riches. And the riches are the second house. And the 10th house is that person with Mars there. It's aspirational. They're like, I'm, moving on up. But sometimes if you have Mars in the 10th house, you have to be careful that you're not fighting authority figures based upon your own difficult experiences with a parent growing up, especially like a father or a father figure, because you can, kind of project that onto all of them, all bosses. In the 11th house, I've talked about Jupiter and how that impacted him. So I think I'm going to leave it here. I hope that this gave you ideas, especially if you have similar placements in your own chart. And take care. Bye.